In this foundational Photoshop lesson, you'll learn how to layer and mask these images so that you can have that effect of the levitation. And this will be foundational, be a little bit more basic than the other ones, where we'll be getting into more advanced techniques. So go ahead and go to File, Open in Photoshop, and then navigate to the support files, and then go to the folder Vintage Studio, follow along Project 1. You can click and drag around both of these, or click one and click the other holding Shift or Control or Command, and press Open. And so we have the workspace here. Yours might look a little bit different, and that's okay. If you click up here and you have Essentials checked, it will look similar to this. If it doesn't, just go to Reset Essentials there. It will reset it back. We don't really need all these panels for this lesson though, so you can actually collapse those using the right-facing collapse panels arrows there and bring those over. We really need just the layers panel for this. So I'm going to click that and actually click and drag it out here so it's floating. And so we have that over there. I'm going to bring that over here. All right, then besides the layers panel, we also want the tools panel, and yours might look like this where it's just one column. We can also click and drag that out, click the right facing here and make it 2 columns, just personal preference. Some people like the 2 columns, some people like the 1. You can toggle that with the arrows there. So if you don't see either of those for some reason, you can go to Window and then make sure Layers is checked and make sure Tools is checked. You also want Options panel up there checked as well. And at the bottom, it will show which documents we have open. And for this example, we just have WAS 5 of 59 and WAS 8 of 59. So the first thing we need to do is layer these. So right now we have them in 2 different files, of course, and later in the course we'll go over more advanced ways how to stack multiple images when you have a bunch. But in this one, we'll just go and show you 2 basic ways to layer these. One way would be to make a selection with the Marquee Selection tool and click and drag. And if yours has a different one there, let's say it's on elliptical by default, it's got that little arrow there, just click and hold and select, make sure it's a rectangular marquee tool. So we have everything selected. You could also go to Select All or Control A on the PC, Command A on the Mac, either way. But we have everything selected. Just go to Edit Copy or Control or Command C, and then go over to our other image, and we'll go to Edit Paste. So that's one way to do that. Another way, I'm gonna go ahead and delete that layer to show you another way. If we don't have anything selected, or we don't necessarily need to have it selected, I'm just gonna click somewhere. You can also go to Select, Deselect. I'm gonna click and drag this out like so. So now it's a floating window, and use this Move tool here, click and drag that over, and that enables us to actually move one image on top of the other, so there are 2 layers in this other image. Notice that it gets close to the edge, then it snaps to the edge with those smart guides. We want that. So if yours is not doing that, go to View, make sure Snap to Document Bounds is checked. That means once we get close to the edge of the document, it's going to go ahead and snap to it so we have a perfect fit. And then make sure Snap is checked as well. And then we can tell, if you click the eye icon on the Layers panel, you can tell the background should not be moving because we should have that on a tripod, not moving in between takes, and we can see the difference there. Now we should have the photo of the model on top here, and then the background layer, the other one. If yours are opposite, that's fine, not a big deal. What you can do is double click on the background layer and then just press OK. That will unlock it. That's one way to unlock it. It's called Layer 0. You can click and drag that above the other layer. If it's a background layer, it won't let us click it above other layers. Click and drag it above there. So one thing to do to notice the difference between the icon, you can also click and drag that opacity. You can use the scrubby slider there. If you just hover over the word opacity and click and drag left and right, make sure you're on the top layer here. And there we go. See, it kind of adjusts it from opaque to transparent. You can also use the slider here if you just click the arrow. And that's helpful when we're looking and seeing what's on the different layers, trying to decide what we want in the final image. So that's an overview of just layering 2 images. In the next tutorial, we'll actually start masking out these areas so that it has that effect of her floating. we'll also be bringing in this record right here from that layer. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Alright, welcome back. In this lesson, you'll learn how to actually mask, make some selections and mask along here so that we have that basic effect of floating. So let's go ahead and do a little bit simpler technique here. What we want to do is right here on this LP here, we want to make a selection there so that we can have that pop through, right? So what we want to do is go ahead and just adjust the visibility, toggle the visibility, and click that eye icon on the top layer so that we only see this bottom layer here. Also click this layer to make sure that we're on this layer, because Photoshop is all about layers. If you're adding an effect, making a selection, painting, adding a mask, any of that kind of stuff, if you're on the wrong layer, it's not going to work. So make sure we click on this so that we're on it, so that we're not, on this layer while we work. So make sure we're on layer 0. And we're going to zoom in. I like to press Command plus on the Mac or Control plus on the PC, and then Control minus or Command minus to zoom in and zoom out. That way we don't have to use the zoom tool there. But in this one, actually, I'm going to use a zoom tool there to zoom in because I have a specific area I want to zoom into. I'm going to make a selection here of this record. So there are a couple different ways to select. If we use the lasso tool, if you click and hold on that, that's just a freehand, and you're probably not going to have a steady enough hand to make a perfect selection. See, we kind of go off the side there, and the polygonal lasso tool is better if we have straight lines on something. If we wanted to click and let go, click and let go, click and we'd have to click a lot to go around the edge of that. So with this one, I'm thinking the quick selection tool is our best bet to make a quick selection. Another possibility would be the elliptical marquee tool. So I'll show you both of those pretty quickly. So if we have the elliptical marquee tool, you have to click and hold onto the rectangular marquee tool and then go to elliptical marquee tool for that one. And by default, you have to click and drag from the side, and you hold shift for perfect circle. It's kind of difficult to get it right at the right size, right? So what we can do when we have a circle like this is hold Alt on the PC or Option on the Mac and start right in the middle. Then we can get this circle, because I know this is a circle, and then if you hold Shift, it'll be a perfect one. It's not working out quite as well because it's a little bit with the angle, so don't hold Shift. We don't want a perfect circle. We want to get it right on the edge there. So something like that. There we go. And we can press left and right after the fact, and you can also hold Shift and add to it. If you want to add to or remove from a selection, you can hold Alt or Option. So if I hold Alt, you can remove from it. If you hold Shift, you can add to a selection, alright, on the keyboard. Now let's try the other one though. Let's go ahead and go to Quick Selection Tool. And this you use when there's a definite edge to something. So I'm going to click and drag, and that kind of worked pretty well. There's a couple areas here where it's not quite right, so I'm going to click and let go again, click and let go, click and let go. So that's pretty good around the edge here. We want this included though, so we can click and drag over it, or you could use one of the other selection tools in conjunction with it. So you could use the elliptical marquee tool, for example, hold Shift, and click it, drag around it. So I need to just adjust the edge right here just a little bit. Just slightly adjust. So what you can do, you can use the lasso tool if you want, or the polygonal lasso tool might be helpful. I'm going to press Control or Command plus there to zoom in without having to use that tool. I'm going to click and let go. Oh, see how I clicked and didn't hold Shift? I press Escape to go back. If you ever mess up, you can go to Edit Undo or Control Z, or to step backward, you can also go to Window and then History, and that will have all the steps that we've done so far, so we can go back a certain number of steps. But I just press Escape, and then we have our selection again. So we do want to remember to hold Shift. All right, so I'm holding Shift, click and let go, click and let go. I'm just going to fine tune the edge here just a little bit, and then if we double click, it will complete that circle there, or that shape there. And I'm going to navigate down here, maybe a little bit of this edge, Get a little bit more of that there. And right there, so that's pretty good. All right, so now we have a selection. We could have a hard edge like that if we wanted. If you want a more nuanced edge where it's gonna kind of fade in between what's selected and what's not, or it's a softer edge, you can go to select and then modify, and you can try feather. Depends on your resolution of your image. You know, typical image, maybe you want to do 2 pixels if it's say 2000 pixels wide or something like that, but you want a larger radius if you want more of a soft edge, especially with higher res images. But later in this course we'll be going over select and then select and mask. But in this one, I think the edge actually is okay, because we kind of want a hard edge there. It's the edge of that record there. So what we'll do is we have the bottom selected here. Click that eye icon of the top layer, and then make sure, this is very important, make sure you're on this top layer as well. And what we want to do is erase these pixels so that the bottom one shows through, right? So what we can do, we could hit delete or backspace and that would delete those pixels, right? But that's destructive editing. So what we want to do actually is mask out this area here. But right now that's opposite. If we click this add layer mask at the bottom, what'll happen is we'll mask out or erase without being destructive this area out here. We don't want that. We actually want the opposite. So what we want to do is go to select inverse. And what that does is now it select everything but this area. All right. Now we can actually press add layer mask, and then that pops through. All right. So now I can zoom out and you can kind of see the difference. So this is the lower and that's the top. I'll actually press shift on the mask. You can see the before and after. We just are letting that LP pop through. So if you hold shift and click the mask, is this white box over here is the mask. That's the before and after. So next what we need to do is mask out these stools. What we can do is control on the PC or command on the Mac and then plus. So command plus or control plus to zoom in. And we need to make a selection right along this edge. And this is why it's important when you're taking the photos, so that one, we don't want any see-through area showing the stools. So she did a pretty good job here. You don't want the stool pushing on the dress so that you see the edge of it, the form of it, pushing it out. And we also don't want, for example, hair coming behind, so that it would, for example, be here and behind the stool and then there. That would be a lot more Photoshop work in post-production. So let's go ahead and make a selection. What we need to do is, for this one, I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool and just click, and you can zoom in if you need to get really on the edge there. I can come off the edge here because it's not a big deal. Only when the stool, that border between the stool and the model, is when we need to get really close. So I'm going to zoom in there, so as close as we can, and that. All right, and then I can press Control or Command minus to zoom out so we can see what the next spot is. I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then Control or Command plus to zoom in again. So I'm going all the way around. I just click and let go, click and let go, click and let go. And you could try some of the other tools. For example, the quick selection tool might work as well. For this one, there's a definite edge, and I can just click often to make more of the curved areas for selection with that tool. So go ahead and go up here. This is the next spot. We need to get somewhat close. And we can feather the edge as well if we want after the fact. But the cool thing about doing a mask is that once we make a selection and add a mask, we can still change it after the fact. And then this stool, second stool, we need to remove. Probably won't take quite as long. We're just going over here. And then make sure we keep this dress here. Alright, I'm going to zoom out and see where we are. Okay. I'm going to go all along here and then make sure we keep there, and we started around here, so I can hover, see how it adds that little circle? That means I'm completing that selection, or you can just double click somewhere and it will complete it for us. So right now I'm on the actual layer, right? Make sure we're on the layer mask. It's right here where it's mostly a white box there. So what we need to do is mask this out, which means we need to add black to it. So this is another way to add to that mask. We could paint black in with a brush tool, or we can just press Alt backspace on the PC or Option backspace or delete on the Mac, and then we've got that difference. Notice there's a slight difference though between the two. You notice, I'll go back one. There's a slight lighting difference. So if we want to adjust that edge, we can. We could go to Select, Modify Feather, and let's just feather it 2 pixels. And then press Alt backspace on the PC or Option delete on the Mac. And then let's see what we got. There's a couple areas to really adjust. You can see this, the lighting's slightly different. So how do we change that? We can just actually brush the edge there so it's gradual. So what we'll do, if you press Alt click the mask over here, it'll show our actual mask, and see how it's got kind of a blurred edge there. That's because we added the feather. If you use the hand tool, you can click and drag around, or you can space click and drag with most tools selected to move around. So this one has more of a hard edge, that one has more of a soft edge, right? So if we Alt or Option click that mask again, it brings that back. And so what we need to do is zoom in a little bit over here, and if we paint black in while we're on this mask with a brush, and if you have up here at the top a larger size, just bring that down a bit. We want the hardness set to 0%, so it's very soft edge. You can also press the left and right bracket, and that will resize the brush, as you see. What we need to do, instead of using black, I mean that works to an extent. If we paint black in, what it does for the foreground is it just erases the content, see, of that layer. We don't want to do that. I'm going to press Control Z on the PC or Command Z on the Mac. If you press white in, what it does is it brings back those pixels of the layer that we're on. Alright, we don't want to do that either. We actually want to have a gradual change right here. And so one way to do that, we can actually go to Color on the Colors panel here and just bring that over a bit. We could do 50% if we just want it right in the middle for gray. And then we can just click and drag, and it just softens that edge a little bit. If we go too far, we start to bring those pixels back in, so you just want to undo. You can do that. Again, left bracket to make it a little bit tinier, and just make that more of a slight change there. And then over here as well, make this a slightly larger. And again, make sure your brush edge is, the hardness is set to 0%. Get a nice soft edge there. See, that's kind of bringing that in a little bit. We don't want that, so we want to get right in the edge. Alright, kind of paint over here a little bit, so the change is a little bit more gradual. Alright, and so if we zoom out, it looks pretty good. Problem is we need to fine-tune the areas right down here. And the cool thing about adding a mask instead of just erasing is that we can zoom in, and I'm going to make just a hard edge selection here, so it's not feathered at all. So I'm going to use the marquee selection tool and hold shift to add to it and make a definite edge right here. And I'm just click and let go, click and let go, click and let go to get this edge. So the feather worked in some areas, but some it ended up having kind of a more gradual change that we wanted. So I just need to select these areas so the darker hues there are not showing through. Alright, and same thing here. You want to make that selection. So with those selected, press Control backspace or Command delete on the Mac, and what that does is instead of filling it with black, which would erase the content of this layer or mask it out, you know, non-destructively erasing the pixels, it actually brings them back in. All right, so if I zoom out here, looks a lot better. And we can fine tune that down at the bottom as well, but that's the basic idea. If you wanted to remove, for example, this area with the string, instead of the mask, make sure you're on the actual layer, this top layer here, and you can use something like, for example, the clone stamp tool. If you go to the clone stamp tool and just Alt on the PC or Option on the Mac, somewhere around here where we want to set the source area, and then just click and drag for the destination. So it's going to pull pixels from over there and it will bring pixels over here. So something like that, and you can fine tune that as needed. And we'll be doing a couple more techniques like that later in the course. And same thing at the top. If you Alt click and then Alt click and then just click, it's just pulling some of that over from the other area just to get rid of that fishing line there. So that's the basic technique of layering, making selections, and masking. If you feel a little bit confused, that's okay. We're going to repeat some of this, but not in a redundant manner. We're going to show another way to do it where we actually select a stool first and mask that out and make that selection really a definite edge. So you don't have that blurred edge, which helps on some of this area, but down here we had to go back in, of course, and make a more definite edge in the selection before removing or bringing back pixels. So just to review really quick before we get into the next lesson, you layer the images, then you make a selection, and then you add a layer mask over here. And then even after we add that layer mask, we can add or remove from it. For example, with the brush tool, we can set the foreground. If you press D, it'll set the foreground to black and background to white, and you press X, it'll flip those, just a shortcut. If you're not understanding what masking does, I'll just show you really quick. With this mask here selected, the white box, if I click and drag black in, it erases the content of the layer that we're on until it's almost all black right there, and we could fill that. If I press X, it flips it, and if I paint white in, it brings back the content of this top layer that we're on that has the layer mask. So I think this will sink in the more we do that. We're going to do a couple more examples, but we'll show other techniques as well so that you really learn something new and a lot of different new things in each lesson. Thanks. Welcome. In this lesson, you'll learn even more techniques while we work on yet another image. Now in this one, we have, as you can see, 6 images. This is in the support files, Vintage Studio folder, follow along project 2. And we could click and drag around all of these, click open, and we've got all these images here, and we could go through and layer them, by bringing them back out here, use the move tool, click and drag one onto the other. We could do that, however, there's an easier way to stack these pretty quickly. So I'm going to close all those out. So what you want to do is go to File, Scripts, and then load files into stack. What that means is it's going to take a bunch of images and stack them into layers pretty quickly. So click that, and then you'll click browse to the folder that we want to load the images from. So click and drag around all of those, and then press open, and we've got them all listed here. It should say 31, 36, 37, 38, 40, 43. And we don't need to have attempt to automatically align source images, so press OK. And this will go through and stack them all for us, so we don't have to, go to edit, copy, edit, paste, or click and drag them with the move tool. So what you should end up with is 6 layers with the eye icon and see the different images. And in this step, we want to basically just see which one we want as our kind of base one. I think it'd be this one actually. And then we want to add, we actually want to remove this stool and have the background one, right? Have this one there. So I actually want 31 on the bottom. And then the one where I'm holding this chair, maybe we can use the chair in that one. Or maybe that one. You kind of look through and see, maybe you want the LP that's turned a little bit. or you want one that's circular like that, and then also this one as well. So go through and determine which props you want to use and in which areas. Yours does not have to look exactly like mine or Christine's, but you can follow along in this one to learn a couple more techniques. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take 31 of 59 and drag that all the way to the bottom. And then 36, I'm going to click and drag in the layers panel and drag that to second to the bottom. All right, so that leaves us with these two. All right, and we want to mask her assistant right over there. All right, so we'll go through these and we can actually name them so we remember what we want to use from each one. So let's just say on this one we want to use this record. So I'll double click that right there and just call it record. And on this one, maybe we'll use that record there, but in the left side. So I'll say left side record. And this I'm going to double click and call it right side record. Actually inside the sleeve there. Let's see, this one, I think we'll use this one for that chair. And then finally this one, maybe that record up top. Let's see the difference between that background one and this one, yeah. Maybe we'll use that record just as another example, top right. Alright, so we can toggle the visibility of these with the eye icon and figure out, the biggest challenge I think in this one is going to be the shadow, because as you remember from the photo shoot, the sun was moving throughout the day, throughout the hour or two that we were there, and so it's moving those shadows quite differently, but it's okay, we got that kind of edge to it, so we will figure that out. If we ever want to see the visibility of one layer by itself, instead of having to, click the icon for all the other ones, you can hold Alt on the PC or Option on the Mac and just click a certain layer's icon, and that will have that layer be visible. Alright, so with this one, again, we just want this bottom layer visible, and then the second to bottom layer visible. So I'm going to go ahead and call this background. It's not the background layer literally, like it's still an editable layer. We can drag it above other ones, but we're going to call it background for that one. And then this will be the one where the model's in, and the chair, as far as the couch over there, but we're going to mask out that down there. So let's go ahead and do that. So when we do that, I'm going to zoom in. Alright, and right here we want to mask out. So we could make a selection again like last time, but I'm going to show a slightly different method. So go ahead and go to the brush tool, and again we want a soft edge brush. Make sure that hardness is set to 0%. And as far as the size, we can toggle that with the left or right bracket as over here, or you can change it up here, of course. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a mask. I'm not gonna make a selection first this time. I'm just gonna add a mask. So this right here, this layer, add a layer mask, and then make sure you're on the layer mask, this white box. If you're not, if you're on the regular layer and you click, it'll actually paint black or white in, right? We want to paint black or white on the actual layer mask. Make sure foreground is set to black, so you can press X on the keyboard and flip them, or just press D to make the default, press X to flip them. And we're gonna just make this a little bit larger, and then with that soft edge brush, I'm just gonna click and drag and mask that out. And notice the shadows will change as well. That's okay. We're gonna keep this edge to it there. Make sure this is very gradual. You can also, if you want to bring, you can use the foreground color picker, or you can go to window and then color and just bring that back down to gray. You could even do kind of 75% around there, around that area, and click and drag that. So it just is a little bit more gradual. Bring that down a little bit. I'm going to make this smaller. I don't want to go over where that stool is. So you don't want the stool in there at all. See how it brings that back in a little bit? You just want, I'm making that just a little bit more subtle change. So I'm actually gonna go up here, press D on the keyboard and then X, and then we've got black as a foreground again. I'm just gonna really click in there. Now I masked all that out and it looks fine, but that corner, that edge, is not gonna work with a soft edge brush, and we actually need to make a selection for that. But while we're here, I'm gonna look around and see, we need to make a selection there as well. So that's pretty much all we can brush out without making a selection in this one. And you'll notice if I shift click the mask, it shows the before and then the after. All right, so we're just erasing that out. So I'm gonna zoom in, and this time I'm gonna use the polygonal lasso tool. And for these edges here, this is a little bit easier than the other one. It's got this definite edge. So I'm gonna go way around this and then double click. So that's selected. And I want to keep that hard edge there on that side there. We can brush later if we need to, but I'm gonna keep that selected, and then I'm gonna press Alt Backspace or Option Delete on the Mac, and then that adds black. I'm gonna Alt click this to show you. It adds black to that mask. All right, so I'm gonna zoom out. Looks pretty good. So what we also need to do is go over here with the assistant. Her arm was showing, and so that's a definite edge, right? So we can use the polygonal lasso tool. Yeah, as you use these selection tools, you'll learn that, you know, when you got definite edge and you got straight lines, polygonal lasso tool is good. You can click often to do curves, but this is what it's really meant for, is a definite edge there. And I'm going to press Alt Backspace and see how we have a slight difference here, because these windows, the curtains were blowing a little bit through, so we've got a little bit of a problem here. And we also actually need to get closer in there. So I'm going to get slightly closer, Alt Backspace again. That's the cool thing about this, is we can delete and bring back pixels by adding black or white to the mask. All right, so you can leave that if you like it, if it's not noticeable. Otherwise, you can actually, if you have another layer that's a little bit different that you like more, let's see, that one's kind of straight down. So far, I'm gonna shift click the mask to see the before and after. All right, so we've removed that stool, and removed the assistant right there. And in your actual touch-ups, you take a little bit more time to zoom in. I'm just doing this for time's sake. I'm showing you the techniques. I don't want to bore you with, you know, hour-long videos. We can only do 20-minute videos anyway on the site, but hopefully you're learning this technique. You would just repeat the process over and over. And this one, that's all we really need to mask out, though, in that area. You see the importance during the photography part, though, why we don't want the stool pushing on the dress of the model, and we also don't want things going really behind if we can avoid it. We can always use the bottom layer if we need the background, but for example, if her hair was behind the stool, that would be problematic because we don't have those hair pixels behind the stool if it was in the same photo. So this was shot well. We just need to combine a couple more things. We'll add a couple more objects from the other layers in the next lesson. Thanks. All right, welcome back. We're going to continue adding a couple more objects, and then we'll be done with this particular image. Welcome back. In this lesson, you'll learn a couple more techniques, and we need to add a couple more objects to this composite photo for the final look. This one we called right side record. If you click that, you can see we just want to add that record there. So this one will actually be easy. Just make sure you're on that layer, and we want to zoom in to that specific area there. And this one, polygonal lasso tool. If you want to include that sleeve coming out, you can, whatever that is, or you can just have the actual record album holder there. So I'm going to go like that. Just click once, click, and then click. All right, so we got that selected. And so now what we want to do is add a layer mask. So add a layer mask on the bottom while that's selected, and that will mask out everything but the area that was selected. So that's a different way to add it. It just fills the entire thing with black except white with the area that was selected. So if I shift click it, you can see the difference. Alright, and if there's something else you wanted to use, say if you wanted to use this one or whatever, you could add that as well. You just add it as a selection, hold shift and add that as a selection, make all the selections, and then add layer mask. Alright, let's go to the next one, left side record. And so with this one, I'll just use the quick selection tool, and it does a pretty good job. Alright, and I'm not going to feather the edge on this one. I'm just gonna have that selection, just maybe adjust that a little bit. We could go through with the other selection tools. You could do the polygonal lasso tool, you could try the elliptical marquee tool, but for this one, just do a quick selection tool. And I'll add a layer mask. I'll zoom out here, and we'll see the before. There's the background, and then that one, and then that one. It's just a slight different angle with that. It just depends on if you want a little bit of reflection on that record, alright? So next one's the chair that I'm holding in the back there. Let's see, so what we need to do, make sure we're on that layer, and I'm going to use a polygonal lasso tool here, and I need to, really the edge, Control plus here, get right along that edge. And I'm wanting to select the chair, so I'm going to go way on the side there. That's not a big deal because that's going to match the other one. I'm going to go back and select those, but I'm going to just do a selection really quickly here. Actually, I'm going to go in. I think it's right there. So if you think about it, we have the chair selected, and that's what we want on this layer. We're just using the chair. So I'm going to add layer mask. And so you see it's over. We actually will need to mask out more than that, which is fine. You can use the move tool and move that over just a little bit. You notice the lighting's a little bit different. We can use the chair from the other layer if we want, or all you got to do is just mask out the background there because the lighting's different. It's farther away from the window there. So I can just click with the quick selection tool if we want, get that edge there, and then press Alt backspace, and I'll fill it with black there, and something like that. So I'm just doing pretty quickly. You could use the other selection tools if we wanted to add to it as well. It just depends on how effective this one is. So that's the cool thing about masking, is that you can paint white back in, right? So I'm just going to paint with the brush tool. Make sure you're on thing there and just paint like that a little bit more solid. Let's bring in those pixels back in, all right, without bringing the background. It just selected a little bit too much on the edge there. So this is just to show you another technique. Again, you can paint white back in and paint black to erase, paint white to bring it back in there. All right, kind of had too much of a feathered edge there with that selection. Similar to a feather edge, is kind of blurred out a little bit. So I'm going to paint black right there, paint black right here, pretty quickly. Make it a little bit larger here so I can. And if you want a hard edge, we can just set the hardness to 100% or 50, you know, whichever works best there. So we could zoom out, and there we go. And then finally, this top one, I think we're going to use the record from the top right, and that's pretty quick. And again, if you want, we can also just use this chair here instead of using the other chair. It just depends on which one you want to use. It doesn't really matter. But this one, pretty quickly, we can just use the quick selection tool, or let's try the magic wand tool to show a different one. If I just click and let go, the tolerance is set to 10. 0 would be it doesn't select any other colors than what we're selecting. 20 would, or 30, you know, would select more, a wider range. So I tried 30 on this one. I'm gonna click. All right, and then I need to use that in conjunction with one of these. All right, just hold shift to get that middle part. All right, so now that I got that selected, add layer mask. So then I zoom out, and then there we go. So we've got 6 layers Again, we've got the bottom layer, which is our background that only has some of the props in it. And then we have the next one that has the model, but we had to mask out the stool and the assistant. And then we've got the next one where all we added was this one record over here. And then we added another record over here because it was at a different angle. And then we added the chair and moved it as well. And then we've got the record in the top right hand corner. So pretty good composition. It's not too busy. And it's got this effect of, the wind blowing, and this is up on its side and she's floating, holding onto the pole there. So thanks, I hope you learned a lot. We're going to be learning more techniques in the other lessons, adding something each time so that you keep learning different considerations and tools and techniques in this levitation digital art. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Go ahead and navigate to the support files, and if you go to Vintage Studio PSD examples, these are all layered Photoshop files. Now some of these layers have been merged. Christine just wanted to provide a bunch of more examples, mainly for inspiration. So if you open those in Photoshop, it gives you a couple more examples of different ways to layer the resulting photos from a photo shoot. So this one, of course, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layers, because it has a lot more props in it, right? So just go through those and check those out. And you can see one of them, she actually adjusted the roof there, or some of them, because her visual art professor actually wanted it a little bit more simple. So she just used clone stamp tool or painting in and possibly content aware tools to fill in that area up at the top, just so it's a simpler ceiling. But you can see if you press Alt on the PC or Option on the Mac, and you can see the different masks that she had created in there, and just the different ways that she layered these images. Now if you do apply an effect such as lighting or color, of course, to your example, we do want to combine it onto a new layer on the top, or you can save it as a JPEG and then work on that JPEG. But what I would do again is just select them all, Control Alt E on the PC or Command Option E on the Mac. Then it combines all those, merges them together into a copy, and then you can adjust the lighting to that top layer. But these are just for examples, just for educational purposes, just for you to look at a couple more examples in Photoshop of all these layered files that she worked on, just to show more examples from this photo shoot to inspire you in your own photography. And she has the models pose in many different ways, of course, and the point is just to come up with different looks and different poses for different looks. And I think this one ended up looking really cool. So thanks, and we'll see you in the next lesson.